You're listening to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast, a place for sex addicts to share their experiences of recovery, to help break the stigma, myths, and misconceptions of sex addiction. This podcast may contain topics of sexuality, sexual trauma, dysfunction, or other things that may be triggering, so listener discretion is advised. Hello, and welcome to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. My name is Jason, I'm a sex addict, and I will be your podcast host for today. How's it going, everyone, and welcome to episode 128 of the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. This week, I'm happy to be sharing a recording from a workshop that I did at our annual Bay Area retreat, and this was entitled Service Keeps You Sober. Originally, I had planned on doing a workshop on music and recovery, and I've already committed myself to doing that as a workshop for next year. At our retreat committee meetings this year, we thought it would be a good idea to start recruiting and talking about committee service for next year's retreat while we still had our target audience at the retreat this year. Over the past few years, I'd been planning on doing some intergroup work at the retreat and decided to combine the two ideas for this workshop. And since I read from the Green Book in the workshop, I thought I would read a little bit from my workshop handout, which originally came from an email that I sent out to our intergroup reps. And it says, over the past few years, we have had a number of problems with communication within our Bay Area SAA community. Whether through email or attending meetings, we need to be able to share about events like the retreat or giving thanks, as well as keeping our meeting information updated. As meeting information changes from online, hybrid, or in person, we need to be able to communicate with all of our meetings. In effort to get our information as accurate as possible, we are looking for contact information from each group and asking members to help us canvass all of our meetings in person and online. And I do talk about this in the workshop. This is something that I've been trying to do over the past few years and was hoping to do it at the retreat. Looking for local meeting contacts, intergroup representatives, and group service representatives, or GSRs. And speaking of GSRs, I also had a pamphlet from the ISO about group service representatives, and I wanted to read a little bit from that as well. What is the Group Service Representative in Sex Addicts Anonymous? The Group Service Representative, GSR, is an important connection between the local group and the International Service Organization, or ISO, and thereby the rest of the Sex Addicts Anonymous Fellowship. You may ask, how is this so? Why is this important? The spiritual principles of the 12-step program of recovery, as set forth in the steps, traditions, and concepts, call us to service, concern for, and support of sex addicts at home and throughout the fellowship. To take full advantage of this guiding principle of service, the GSR serves a vital role in bringing forward the concerns and opinions of local groups. And we get into further discussion into GSRs in the workshop. So combining my idea of canvassing our groups to get service representatives, whether it's intergroup or GSR, or the local meeting contact, and talking about service on the committee level, whether at our retreat committee or our giving thanks committee, I thought this would be a great idea to put this workshop together called Service Keeps You Sober. Before getting to the workshop, I did want to mention at the end of this episode, I'll be talking about the ISO's service website, saa-iso.org, and a little bit more about registration pages for GSRs and the service resume and things like that. So while at the retreat, this is more focused on the Bay Area, a lot of other places around the world do have intergroups, and they may not function the same exact way that our intergroup works, but the general idea is pretty much the same. And the push for having area assemblies with GSRs is something that the ISO has been working on over the past few years. So I will be sharing some links and talking a little bit further about that at the end of this episode. And now, without further ado, here is my workshop from the 2024 Bay Area Retreat, the workshop called Service Keeps You Sober. I hope you enjoy it. Hey everyone, I'm Jason. I'm a sex addict.
Hey Jason.
And welcome to the workshop that I'm doing this year called Service Keeps You Sober. Before starting off with the workshop handouts that I have, I did want to read a few things from the Green Book. And this is on page 75, chapter 5, Our Purpose, the first paragraph on service. We depend on each other to stay sexually sober, and SAA depends on our service to keep functioning. Service in SAA ranges from one-on-one outreach over a cup of coffee to the worldwide outreach performed by the International Service Organization, ISO. Helping keep SAA running is an extension of carrying our message of recovery. Our voluntary efforts are essential to the success of the fellowship and the recovery of every sex addict who is a part of it. And then I did want to jump over. And we read this at one of our meetings when we do service rotations. Tradition 7, we often think of as the money tradition, that every SAA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. But in there, on the bottom of page 88, it says, being fully self-supporting means being aware of the responsibility of every member for supporting the group. Some of us have a natural tendency to sit back and let others do all the work. Others are all too willing to take on service positions and hold them indefinitely. Although this might seem to create a perfect balance between those who take over and those who sit back, in actuality, such a situation works against becoming self-supporting. A group works well when all members are encouraged to serve in line with their abilities and when service positions are regularly rotated among the group's members. We are fully self-supporting when we all take ownership of our common welfare, secure in the knowledge that even if certain members leave, the group will be strong enough to continue to carry its message. So, the reason that I wanted to bring up this topic as for a workshop is I've noticed this happening at meeting level, at intergroup level, at ISO service level, at retreat committee level, and other committees that I will get to, that we have a lot of people who do service for our community, and we seem to be the same people that keep rotating over and over. And it gets to a point where service burnout happens and things can stop working if this retreat could easily not happen if no committee members are there to get it going. And the handouts will show the amount of work that goes in to doing a retreat committee, or to do a retreat. So looking at the handouts, I've got several things, and we'll kind of walk through them as we go. The first page has some general information on service at the local, intergroup, and GSR levels. GSR is Group Service Representative, and we'll get into that. And then on the back side of that, I put some important links for different things for intergroup, for registering GSRs, for ISO. Is anyone familiar with the ISO service website? I know you are, and I know you are. So there's a service website. A lot of us are familiar with SAA-recovery.org, which has a list of our meetings and our literature, has links to the store, things like that. But for service, there's another website that not a lot of people really know about, is SAA-ISO.org. And that's where all the business stuff is. When we have conferences in October, welcome. All of the business motions are posted there. General information about public information and cooperation with the professional community, and we'll talk about that later here. That used to be called Outreach. Outreach is an easy way of saying it. So instead of saying that mouthful, we say PICPC. So we'll be covering that. The next page is stuff that I wrote up a few years ago, and I actually had to update on. This is a handout that we used to hand out to new intergroup service reps. Whenever they came to meetings, they had printed copies of this. Since the pandemic, we're on Zoom, and so it's been harder to hand these out, but I will send them out via email, and it's got a lot of information about what intergroup does, what types of positions are available at intergroup. The next page is on the retreat service positions and the various categories that we have there. And in November, we also do, which is now handed over to intergroup, is Giving Thanks. And that is a fundraiser for the ISO, and it is also a get-together to just be in each other's presence and celebrate our fellowship. In order for all of those things to happen, we need people to be of service. And so recently, we're running into the problem. A lot of people will know me from the Sex Addicts Recovery podcast. I also work at Intergroup. I work on the retreat committee. I am the area chair for Area 40, and we'll get into areas and group service representatives. And I hit burnout. It's hard to do that. And so one of the objects of this workshop is to recruit people into service. Over at the back tables, we'll talk about it a little bit more in detail, sheets for the various areas and sheets for signing up for the retreat committee for next year. Often what happens is we get the retreat committee together and don't have enough people to say, hey, we're getting together and doing the retreat committee. Do you want to be a part of it? So we're trying to get ahead of the game this year by recruiting at the retreat instead of in November. So with that being said, does anyone else want to mention anything before we kind of move along? I don't have a real structure to this because of service burnout.
I'm Paul. I'm 6.
Hey, Paul.
So, I appreciated your comment about service burnout. I was just talking with the head of the board of directors of ISO, who's one of our members here. Mm-hmm. He chatted to me, hey, Paul, have you done the ISO service? Are you interested in being in ISO service? That it might be helpful to join, and we need people. And, I told him my story, which was yours, right? Yes, I used to do ISO service. I was head of this committee, I did that committee, and I was doing intergroup, and I was doing this and that, and it happens, burnout, and when that hit, I stopped. What I noticed was that I wasn't doing the things that I said I would do. I could say, yes, I want to be of service. Yes, I want to do these things. But the reality was, as the burnout grew, I wasn't accomplishing the things that I said that I would do. And that was making me feel depressed, which makes me want to work harder and do better. And then when I don't achieve it, and so it wasn't a healthy situation for my addiction either. So it meant pulling back a lot. And I can see a future where I'm again able to amp up into service. But what really helps is having regular turnover. And that spot in the 7th tradition, I just love it. It's 7th tradition isn't all about money. Our meetings stay healthy when we have turnover. I'll pass.
Okay. So both of you, I know, do a lot of service. So
actually, I'm Daniela Saxadic.
Hey, Daniela.
I served for 2 years in the conference steering committee of ISO. I guess I'm an early bird now. That after 2 years, I decided not to nominate myself for continuing because I felt I needed to take a break, so I can see that happening, and at the same time contemplating there are a lot of people in SAA. And maybe that if we were more able to kind of balance out, rotate a bit at a time, a little bit each, this will not happen. The other part is that as I experience as being of service is I was accidentally voted. I mean, it's a nominated position for CSC service. I just showed up at the conference as the area representative for the Italian language area group, and my co-attendant said, "Hey, why don't you just there's a nomination? Why don't you do it?" I wasn't prepared, and I thought, okay, I'm a rookie. I don't know all these terms and all this stuff, and I think a lot of people like me feels like, okay, in order for somebody to serve at the ISO level or intergroup, you're an expert. You have to be an expert, right? You have to be who knows what, and that's not true. So I just then there's a pretty basic stuff most of us can do. That's what I experienced. So there's not like a high threshold of serving. There's not even a terribly high threshold of sobriety. Sobriety is important, and we do have criteria, recommendation for different levels of service. But I think that it may be more intimidating than it really is for many who are new or never tried. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, John, sex addict.
Hey, John.
Yeah, my feeling on this is that while I'm not in any other 12-step programs, I know that other programs, and specifically like AA, which has a long history, service seems to be a lot more of the culture of the fellowship, where there's like when newcomers come, there's like a message that's spread that it feels like my sponsor says I need to do this, and there's just this kind of energy towards like doing service and doing all these things with a lot of meetings, and it's just something I think a lot about, like what are the ways that can be that can be more of a part of the culture of and obviously this is something at an individual meeting level, at a larger level, whatever it might be, but because as the title of the workshop, Service Keeps You Sober, that's kind of the idea of the 12th step and giving it away. And it seems like some people might feel like, oh, that's something that later down the line I can do, like Daniela was saying. And until people really are just kind of put in the position of like being at a meeting where someone will just say, I nominate this person, and then they're just kind of like, oh, I don't think I can do it, and it's explained otherwise, then they can. And I'll just say one more area of service or thing that I've been working on a lot is kind of since COVID, a lot of meetings went online and some meetings never came back, and there's just the number of in-person meetings is not what it could be, I think, given the number of people around different areas. And certain areas don't have really any meetings. And so I've started 2 meetings. I started a Benicia Saturday morning meeting and a San Rafael meeting, which had other meetings, but another day wouldn't hurt. Mm-hmm. The Monday evening one. And that's something where whenever I tell people that, they're just like, oh, I couldn't do that, or how did you do that? And it's just like, you just, if you're available and you're willing to come, you can do it. And, just getting information out there about the different types of service and, the accessibility of it. That's how the fellowship grows and how we can attract more newcomers and, have more people here to serve at some point. So, thanks.
So from here, I'd like to start off at the meeting level, and then we'll get into intergroup and then area. So how many of you do service at your local meeting? All right. So often it's secretary, treasurer, literature person. What other types of positions are out there?
We have a Zoom call today because ours happens to still be hybrid.
You're a hybrid meeting.
Field seeker, digital recorder.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Greeter.
Okay.
The digital recorder for the Saturday morning San Jose or other?
Well, I'm on the Saturday morning San Jose Zoom one.
Yeah.
On the Zoom one, and we have a digital recorder there, and then the one that's at the church also has a digital recorder. Yeah, and they're on storyboard.
Mm-hmm. Yep. A lot of times that's where I started. I started doing literature for the first meeting that I went to. one of the things I love about service rotations is when people nominate people. So I got nominated to be the secretary of a group that I would not have volunteered for, and I said yes, and it was awesome. There are certain service positions, I think treasury I have not done, but I've done most of the other types. At the meeting level, whenever it comes to intergroup rep, don't hear a lot of nominations, a lot of hands going up for that. So is there anything that other people would like to talk about at the meeting level? So most of this is going to be the other levels, but at least at the meeting level.
Yeah, I wanted to reemphasize that, greeting the newcomer is a level of service. Showing up at the meeting is the most basic level of service that, I've seen written in the Green Book. You show up at a meeting can't occur if there are not two people there. And so showing up is sort of, in my experience, the first level. Speaking to the addict who is still suffering is a level of service. And that, I don't think it gets a lot of glory, and being a greeter, which I think is a fantastic level of service. It doesn't require, I know money, I can carry a suitcase full of literature, I can read a script. You just have to say, hi, the meeting is over there, and it matters. So I think there are lots of different levels of service you can do, even at meeting level.
Just like to add to that, Jeff, grateful recovering sex addict, newcomer ambassador, that's what we call it, all those Zoom calls and stuff. I don't know how many meetings do that. I've been newcomer ambassador at Los Codys and the San Jose meeting, and yeah, it's important to have that, because I get people chatting with me during the meeting, and I kind of, work that out and how that works. But I'm assuming that's a position they have in the meeting.
Yeah, some meetings will have that. I know when the Los Altos meeting was really big, often what happens after the meeting is over, fellowship, everyone wants to get around and talk. And often someone that's new to the program, it doesn't really know everyone. And so we had a newcomer ambassador see, this person's new to the meeting. Why don't you come over here, let me talk about literature. My noon Zoom meeting that I talk about a lot on the podcast, we've got a fellowship hour after the meeting is over. As soon as the meeting is over, anyone new to the program, first time at this meeting, first time in the program, do you have any questions? And we have a number of people that just step up and get those questions answered and get them resources. So yeah, newcomer ambassador is really, really important.
Yeah, it's good to have a female too.
Yeah, especially in mixed meetings, definitely.
I think that, so there are the roles that make the meeting function, and those are important. I think those are easier to get people to get involved with. Secretary, welcome, and so forth. Then we have the two, as you already mentioned, which are a little bit, people probably don't feel ready, or they don't know what it means, which is the intergroup representative and the GSR, which are two different positions.
And I will get into the distinction.
So that's something where, the distinction may not be clear, it feels maybe, I don't know what it means, and so I think kind of cuts out the connection of the groups to the broader fellowship.
Yeah, so one of the things that got me to that next level is each meeting with the ISO on their website, and I don't know if we have it on the Bay Area website, is a local meeting contact. So this person will have their phone number and email out there for people trying to find information about the program. This is not just at the intergroup level, but the meeting level. So I listed my phone number and email with the ISO for one of the Santa Clara meetings. At that time, I think we only had one Santa Clara meeting. We now have 6 meetings at that location. The Thursday night Los Altos meeting, I'm still a contact person for. So when newcomers, people are researching, I want to go to this meeting. Do I need to sign up? Is there a cost? How do I qualify? I answer calls, I answer emails, and get people to a meeting. And so I started doing that for specific meetings. And it's weird getting cold calls from people, and just some people are in their first 24 hours of being discovered and have no idea what's going on. And, I am scared as hell. What am I going to do? Hey, come to this meeting. We've got, this many people here. This is what the format of the meeting is. And just kind of walk them through that. And I'll be at that meeting. Come and say hi to me before, and, I'll walk you through it. And so, being a point of contact is a fantastic thing for newcomers, but it's also for the ISO. When we have meetings that don't have contacts, when they're trying to get information out to meetings, there's no one there, and they have a hard time trying to get information. The ISO is currently going through their meeting list, and they're reorganizing how the meeting page is set up. And we'll get into the back there. I've got a list of all of our Bay Area meetings, and the database that they have. So for each meeting, when a new meeting registers, they have a point of contact. What happens a lot is that point of contact stops coming to meetings, and they don't have it regularly updated. So that's one of the things that I want to do at intergroup and here in this workshop is try to update the contacts for each of the meetings. So that is the next level of service where I stopped being a secretary, a literature person, started becoming a phone person, an email person. And Paul and I, right around the same time, said, I want to get into intergroup. So intergroup at the time was meeting the second Saturday in San Francisco. And for us, it was a long drive. A lot of the South Bay meetings did not have representation regularly showing up at intergroup. And so things that intergroup was doing. So intergroup is basically the collection of all of the Bay Area meetings. So they put up the Bay Area SAA.org website, and we've since done a number of other things that I can get into. So if you look at the sheet here, intergroup, the basic responsibilities of an intergroup rep is attending the meeting, and currently we meet on the second Saturday of each month on Zoom, which is the level of entry is really easy. So you don't have to drive 50 miles like Paul and I did. And Paul, I want to hear your thoughts on that in a sec. So you can bring any issues from your meeting to intergroup, any problems that your meeting is having. We had questions come up about certain things. I can't remember the specifics, but it came to intergroup. We tried to see if it was something that intergroup can solve or if the meeting had to solve it on their own. And some things we definitely pushed back to the meeting. But other things where it's like, oh yeah, this is something that we're missing and that we at intergroup can help out. Also, we have announcements coming from intergroup, outer circle activities, the retreat here, giving thanks that we do in the fall. All of these, we have a list of announcements that come out of each intergroup meeting. And if your meeting doesn't have an intergroup rep, you're not going to get that information. And one of the things that we found in the pandemic is the communication just dropped. And it was really hard to communicate with meetings that didn't have intergroup reps, that didn't have local meeting contacts. So it was really difficult. But thank God for Paul stepping up and saying he wanted to be an intergroup rep. I was like, yeah, I do too. Want to carpool. Mm-hmm. And so we made a service day out of it. And Paul,
yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Honestly, the desire to serve at intergroup came out of the retreat. I would come to the retreat once a year, and I'd meet a whole bunch of people that I wouldn't see otherwise, that were all attending San Francisco meetings and blah, blah, blah. And they had exciting and interesting stories, and they were great people, and I'm terrible at following up. And so I go home, and I'd be in my little home meeting for, in Santa Clara for a while, and then the next retreat would come. And people, after a few years, started to recognize me, oh, you're that South Bay guy. You guys are those South Bay guys. We started to make it eventually up into the San Francisco meeting on occasions. Mm-hmm. And intergroup was just a nice step to be able to stay in contact with all of the local meetings. And so this sounds like a good thing to try. And I think it might have been your idea, Jason, since we were coming to San Francisco anyway, to go to the big San Francisco meeting. Mm-hmm. So we'd go to the San Francisco meeting one Saturday a month and then pop over to intergroup. And it was a day of recovery for us. We got up early, we drove up the highway, we went to a meeting, we had breakfast and with fellowship, and then go to intergroup, and then a drive back and we talk. It was great out of triple stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so with the theme of this service, Keeps You Sober, is it kept our heads in recovery and carrying the message to other addicts. Do we have any other intergroup reps at this meeting?
Yes. So I actually got inspired to join intergroup at the last retreat. Mm-hmm. Just someone was talking about with multiple people, and I said, okay, I can join the next one, and it's on Zoom, so it was easy enough. And then at that first intergroup meeting, they were saying they needed someone to take over the phone, and I was, felt like I could do that. I know none of you know me, and everyone was just like, yes.
Yeah, service burnout.
And then after a few months, they were talking about PICPC, and we had a presentation with Phillip from the ISO, and he talked about it. And I initially wasn't open to it just because of just concerns about the kind of work that I do and what being the face of SAA and stuff like that. But I realized most of the duties were things that I was more than able to do, and so I took that on as well. Yeah, and I'm also technically repping meetings in San Rafael, and it's one thing I've noticed is at the local meeting you mentioned that those are things that aren't filled. I find that even with elections they almost skip the intergroup because they know no one's going to volunteer for them. Mm-hmm. I don't know, maybe it's just the meetings I've been to, but I've noticed that it's not really announced. I actually said I can be the intergroup rep of this meeting because I saw it was on the list of things in the secretary mm-hmm. script, but they never said, does anyone want to be this? I just said, I'm already going to it, so I'm going to rep this meeting. Mm-hmm.
That's how I became an intergroup rep for a couple of meetings. I stopped being a rep for one meeting, but I'm still showing up at intergroup. This meeting doesn't have a rep. I'll step up and do rep for that. But the second page of the handout is something that I created. Yeah.
On the rep role, I think that, for example, the meeting I attend, we rotate all the service positions every 6 months, I think. Now, I think that and that includes the intergroup rep and the GSO. Now, I think that for this sort of roles, assuming that the person that takes the role mm-hmm. is able to show up in the group, I think that the rotation over 6 months may not be as productive. In a way,
right.
You would like to understand how things work and then keep going, at least for 1 year, for example. Of course, every group is independent, so it's not that, but I don't know how other groups operate in whether that's a rotated position as well.
Yeah, Los Altos, it's 1 year.
Yeah.
1 year, okay.
It can, a lot of times it will line up with, because since the intergroup rep positions are 1 year,
right. Okay,
it can kind of line up with that, so that there's opportunity, because if someone's only technically the rep for 6 months, then they can't, they could say, well, I'm only a rep for 6 months, so I can't really take a year commitment.
Mm-hmm.
Paul, yep. Maybe this is a suggestion for intergroup or for individual meetings, but I'm wondering if instead of one intergroup rep who serves for a year or two, that a meeting elect 4 intergroup reps. And they, and it's always 4. You elect them every 3 months or every 6 months, so that there's continuity. And someone is always, the 3 people are always like, I know what happened for the last 2 rotations or the last 3 rotations or something like that. And eventually their service is up, but it's not a void. It's like another person who's already trained, who has already been there for, so it creates some redundancy, but maybe extra work, I'm not sure, but it maybe it prevents burnout. So that just came to mind.
Yeah. So I wanted to go to the handout that I have for new intergroup reps. It catches people up to speed, and I'll read it out here for the recording. So intergroup is an affiliation of all SAA meetings in the Bay Area. This is for the Bay Area intergroup. And when I printed this, did this a long time ago, I had said that we had 84 meetings. I went through and counted the website, and we're at 103 meetings. So a lot of those are meetings. It's the same meeting, but one is in person, one is on Zoom. They're no longer hybrid. So one meeting created 2 meetings. So we now have 103 meetings that are on the Bay Area. So the Bay Area Intergroup covers the website, bayareasaa.org. We update our meeting lists. We have a quarterly newsletter. We just put out a new one called Out of the Fog. It comes out, this one was the winter edition. I was hoping to bring some here. Back in the before times, we used to do printed versions of this and bring it to like the Saturday morning meeting. And the Saturday morning meeting, people would grab them and take them to their other meetings. Now it is up online. The cool thing about this newsletter is that it has hyperlinks. So there are a lot of links to the podcast, to other events going on. So if someone's got a digital flyer for an event like the Santa Cruz Beach Burn that's coming up, we can link stuff to that. We've done online polls and things like that. So those are things that you couldn't really get out of a paper version of the Out of the Fog newsletter. So it is there, but I don't know how many people know about it. So this is one of the things as an intergroup rep, we say, hey, the newest edition just came out. Here's how to find it. I do print up some for my in-person meetings, and it has a QR code that'll bring you to the digital version. So,
is there a mailing list? It's not subscribable, right?
No. Our old version, we used to be able to set up for subscribe. We haven't been able to figure out that. We've switched a lot of stuff with our email and the way our emails work. So no one has been able to figure that out. If someone wants to be of service and show up at Intergroup and say, hey, this is how you do it, we lost a couple of people that had that know-how that we don't no longer. So we also have phone lines. We have our general info phone line that is posted on the website, and we have 2 newcomers phone lines. The newcomers lines are divided by men and women, and those phone lines each have at least 3 people, if not 5 people, answering. So if one person misses the call, it'll go to the next phone number, which will go to the next phone number, and so hopefully they can get a response back. And so this is kind of an extension of what I was doing at our local meeting. I did and still do answer emails for Intergroup. I did the phone, which John took over. So there's that. Something that else that came out of Intergroup that didn't exist before was the Sex Addicts Recovery podcast. And so that was an intergroup project that we moved forward. I want to go through what an intergroup meeting is. It's an hour and a half, second Saturday of each month. We usually go through introductions and approval of the minutes. We set the agenda for the day. We have brief reports from a bunch of different committee chairs. We go through old business that needs to be discussed and then move on to new business and then announcements. So this is the things that our intergroup reps will bring to meetings. and then we close the meeting. And so we have certain positions that are elected officers, a lot of things that are committees, like the web team. I'm part of that updates the website. PICPC, and John, did you want to talk about one of the other PICPC things that we're doing this year?
Yeah, so PICPC stands for the Public Information and Coordination with the Professional Community. It took me a while to memorize that. So basically, the public information piece is, different ways that people can find out about SAA or that we can handle locally. So, the older way was kind of newspaper ads and things like that. And now we do things like Google ads to sort of the idea to people are more likely who are local, who are searching for things related to sex addiction or recovery and things like that, are more likely to find our website and have our contact information and things like that, more likely to find the meeting list, which, having that updated and everything can help get people to our meetings. And then the coordinating with the professional community can range from things like, having people represent SAA at like local conferences for like psychiatry, psychological associations, different things. But also things like sending information about SAA to local therapists in the area, and that this is one thing ISO helps with, where they create and mail them out. And then if professionals are interested in having more information, having things like pamphlets and referral packets that they can give to clients, then they can reach out to us, and then I can coordinate sending them more either physical packets or PDFs or things like that. So these are all things that just make it more likely that the paths that people who could come to our fellowship would interact with others are more likely to be sent to us and to particularly our website, which, because we handle at the local level, the intergroup, we can better assure that the information is up to date and accurate.
Yeah. So I'm going to skip through most of the rest of the stuff that's on intergroup. There's a lot of different things we cover. We have an ICC liaison, which is where intergroups around the country will get together and find out what other intergroups are doing. And we also have a COSA liaison. So the COSA group, we have someone that will help coordinate SAA and COSA events. Things like that.
Just have a question.
Yeah.
Is someone currently doing that position?
Not to my knowledge. So if you are interested, you can become an intergroup rep.
It might be.
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of these things, what I wanted to get to with our calendar is in May, we have what's called visioning, where we come up with ideas of projects and things that we want intergroup to cover over the next year, and so we can figure out what our budget is going to be. This is where I floated the idea for the podcast, and then we budgeted money for that and got that moving. So a lot of times we come up with fantastic ideas, but we don't have anyone to move forward with them. And so we don't have enough service reps, other people willing to step up and say, hey, I want to do that. So COSA liaison is one that's just kind of dropped off because we don't have enough people, or the people that are showing up are already doing two or three other things.
So like the quarterly COSA SAA meeting.
That one is not intergroup run.
Oh.
So that is a separate group that there is someone here that you can talk to about that. I'm not going to say his name for the recording because I don't have his permission, but they have their own committee. The retreat committee, I wanted to announce, all of this is independent of intergroup. So a lot of people think that intergroup runs the retreat committee. So there is an entire different treasury for intergroup. The service structure is very much the same, where we've got a chair, we have a volunteer coordinator, registrar, the treasurer, program committee chair, rideshare coordinator, outreach coordinator, which is what I do, and meal coordinator. And those are like the basic core of the committee. And then the rest of the stuff is all the on-site volunteer positions that we have that help run the meetings, help run the workshops, and things like that. So the volunteer coordinator is basically making sure that all of these other positions are filled. And so that is an important role that has gotten skipped on several of the past retreat committees, as we didn't have one pinpoint person to coordinate all of the volunteers. So this is an independent committee outside of intergroup, and a lot of people in intergroup do both, but it is a complete separate thing. So I do have a sign-up sheet for anyone that is interested in doing any service for the committee next year. It's not a commitment, but it's just so we can email people and say, hey, we're starting the committee. I think this year, did we start in November or December?
We had a meeting in November.
Well, yeah, we did one meeting in November,
Yes.
and then usually the kickoff is in December, and then January is where the ball really starts rolling. So having people of interest before then is going to be really handy. So I've got a sign-up sheet over there for that. Similarly, for the giving thanks, this is something that this was an independent committee, freestanding. It is now part of intergroup. And so when intergroup took this over this year, it was a mad scramble to get people to sign up for volunteer positions. So we had a lot of people doubling up on stuff. So I just want to get this information out. This happens in November, so we start talking about it roughly in August. And so if people are interested in that, yes.
Yeah, I was wondering if it was of any value for this group to take enough copies of this flyer to bring back to their home group.
Yeah, so I printed out quite a few copies, and just not sure how many people were going to show up at this workshop. So I do have extra copies. So please bring these back to your groups. And I have other things that you can bring back to
Do you have
your
this digitally, by the way? Do you have this digitally?
Yes. So I had to, over this past week, find out where I had this, find out where I had this. I had all of these in random places. So I think I've got them all collated now. So, yes.
Is the visioning meeting of the intergroup in May part of the regular meeting?
Yeah,
or is it a separate meeting?
We in the past, what we've done is truncated the regular meeting, so we do reports really quick. I don't think we do any old or new business unless it's really important, and then we extend the meeting usually by another half an hour. And in the old days, in the room, we had sheets all around the room under various categories of outer circle activities, brainstorming ideas for that. Anything that we could do to improve the website, anything that we could do to improve this or that. So we have about 10 different categories, and we would just go around the room and people would throw out ideas. And we didn't count how realistic they were, and basically get all of the ideas out there. And then at the end of the meeting, we would kind of give people votes on what they wanted to move forward with. And I thank God that enough people voted for the podcast, and so we got to get that moving forward. And then
sometimes we provided food too.
Oh yeah, we used to have food because we would extend that meeting. So that one is a special one-off. And on Zoom, we have done a Google Sheet. It worked for 1 year. It didn't work for the next year. And it just kind of fell off. So I'm hoping we can revive something this year. And I don't know what it'll be if we actually decide to say, hey, we're going to meet in person. I don't know. But yeah, once we voted on the top vote getters, we would get someone to chair each of those in order to move forward. And then they would be responsible for moving those projects forward. So any other things on intergroup before I move to area service? So a lot of people do get confused between intergroup rep and group service rep. So group service representative is our liaison from our local groups to the ISO. So the conference that happens in October every year in Houston or on Zoom is where the business motions for the entire Fellowship of SAA happens. It used to be every group can send a delegate to the conference. That service structure has changed. So they divided up the world, both in-person and electronic meetings, into various areas. The way they had divided the Bay Area was originally 2 areas, and we said that we have the South Bay groups, we have the East Bay groups, we have the San Francisco groups, we have the North Bay groups. So they kind of form these little cohesive groups naturally. And so we have 4 areas that represent the Bay Area. Area 40 is the Peninsula meetings down to the South Bay. Area 41 is the East Bay and Tri-Valley meetings. Area 42 is the North Bay, Northern California, which includes Sacramento, Redding, and all the way out to Reno. And Area 77 is all of the San Francisco meetings. Since there are so many in the city itself, they could be an area unto themselves, but they also got the southern portion of Marin County. So there are a few meetings in Marin County that are in Area 77. So each meeting can have a group service representative that will report to their area. So I am the area chair for Area 40, all of the Peninsula meetings. So what we do is before any conference and convention used to be at the same time.
It will be again.
In a couple.
So this year is going to be the last one in Houston on its own, and then starting from 2025, it's going to be in Austin convention and conference.
Okay,
again.
I'm glad that they're putting those back together. What we'll do is meet when I guess they announce the business motions after June 30th. We bring those business motions to as GSRs to our meetings. So here's a list of things that are going to be voted upon, and then we, after a meeting, say if you're interested, weigh in your how you want our meeting to vote on this.
Types of things that get voted on?
Mm-hmm.
What types of things get voted on?
A lot of it is updates to literature.
Yeah.
There has been a couple that involved restructuring of committees. What other kinds of things?
Things like there were guidelines for sobriety or on service positions, for example, things like that.
At the ISO level?
Yeah.
At the ISO level, right. This year there were mainly the literature ones.
Approval of new pamphlets.
Approval final, because some of the literature, even if approved by the literature committee, then needs a final, it says conference approval, and that someone's going to have to be voted for that and then get that stamp conference approval. Yeah, and by the way, the motions are not coming from, some of them are coming from the various committees at the ISO, but they're also come from the area. Right? Some areas are more active in coming up with some motions they want to bring to the conference.
Mm-hmm. So any group can raise a motion. It has to be in by June 30th.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's an idea that, at least in my local groups, isn't really absorbed. Mm-hmm. Just that if any singular person in any group feels that SAA is not doing the best that it can and has an idea about an improvement, there's a mechanism for causing change. And the mechanism runs through the GSR. The group says, I don't like, that I don't know. I won't pick an arbitrary.
I don't like that logo.
I don't like the logo, right? They have a business meeting. They inform their GSR. The GSR gets that up to the ISO. The ISO is getting all of this from all of SAA, and they're vetting, which ones can be voted on appropriately and that don't already break the traditions. And then the GSR once again becomes a conduit for how the individual groups want their group, their area, to vote on the change. And so it's a strong mechanism that empowers us as individuals. But I think that the feeling that I get is that, this is all happening up here and it has nothing to do with my program.
Yeah, I do have pamphlets back there for the group service representative that I stole some of the language on here for. This shows the inverted triangle of service structure. So talking about the individual group, the individual member, the individual group service representative to the area assembly. The area assemblies will send a delegate, and then down at the bottom is the conference. So it's, it all stems from the individual to the group to the GSR to the area, and so the ISO is not the top. The individuals are at the top. So the ISO reports to us, basically, in the service structure.
And we ignore them, so they have nothing.
So I have a question. Mm-hmm. So the area assembly, you're saying each area has essentially their own meeting,
yes,
kind of like the intergroup meeting?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll share what happens for Area 40, what happened to Area 41 and 77, and what's happening with Area 42.
Okay.
So when we started signing up GSRs, no one understood how this service structure was going to happen, because we did this in the official switch was around 2018. And that's when we started figuring out that each meeting needed a GSR. When I was signing up people, what does a GSR do? I don't know. We've never had an area assembly. We now, Area 40, I, as the area chair, try to meet 3 times a year. We have been successful on 2 times a year. So once we get the business motions, and then once we have a delegate, and in the meantime, we'll select a delegate for Area 40 to go to the conference. And so we get all of our group conscience for how we want our delegate to vote. And then that happens like right before October. Mm-hmm. And so we've managed to get those 2. I've wanted to use the retreat to be a third area assembly. The 3 of us that are on, so we have the chair, the vice chair, and the secretary form the core. As long as we're here, we can do an area assembly, but there's no time at the retreat. So I thought this would be a perfect time to do it, and it hasn't worked out. What happened with areas 41 and 77 is both of them had area chairs that got out of service. Service burnout or other things happening in their lives. One of them moved out of Area 77 to another place. And so those areas never elected a new chair. And so without a chair, no one's calling for area assemblies. So if you are in Area 41 or 77 and want to get this going again, this is important on why we have GSRs. So you can get together. I've got a list of registered GSRs, and I can help coordinate everyone together. I helped set up Area 40, 41, and 42. Area 77 did that on their own. Once I got those ones established, they elected their own chairs. Area 42 is thriving, as far as I can tell. I got an email for doing this topic as a podcast. This came from the Area 42 chair and asking if I would do this as a podcast episode. I said, I'm doing this at the retreat. Are you going to be here? He actually moved out of the area, but he is still going through Zoom and doing this. So areas 40 and 42 currently have area assemblies. 41 and 77 don't.
Do you happen, I don't know if you happen to know, but is the Area 42 related to the North Bay Intergroup?
Not necessarily. So the North Bay Intergroup are part, or the North Bay meetings are one small part of Area 42. So Area 42 also covers Sacramento and Reno and all the other Northern California meetings. So a majority of the people that are in service with the North Bay Intergroup are probably in service with Area 42. Okay. So they would be a good place to contact people.
In my experience, so I was chair of the ICC, the Intergroup Coordinating Committee for a while, and what we observed were there were some areas where having a separate structure for GSRs and intergroups didn't make sense because of the number of meetings they had or what have you. And so some areas have made the conscious decision that their intergroup reps are their GSRs and they work in tandem to make sure that representation gets done. If an area and an intergroup want to do that, that's on them. Technically, they serve different purposes, but when no one is of service, there's a limited pool of people to do all the work.
In the CSC, we actually wrote this, and I ran
Just for everyone, CSC is Conference Steering Committee.
Conference Steering Committee. So part of it, the conference is the Union of the Areas. Okay. And the conference happens to meet once a year in October, but the conference is all the area delegates are the voice of the ISO. Okay. Now, unfortunately, this transition to the area system came in 2018, I think, with just setting up. Then COVID came. By the way, we didn't invent it. I believe that AA's structure is based on the area, right? Because there was this skew about, if every group can send a representative, only those in the Houston area were more likely to attend that conference. So the area system gives a more equal representation in the territory and globally. That said, it has been a challenge, and part of the things we did as part of CSC was trying to gather the health of this area system, because at the conference in October, where each area is supposed to send via Zoom or in present, you were Area 41, a delegate. Less than half of the areas are represented, right? So the system hasn't fully built. Also because people have some confusion about what does the area do, what does the intergroup do. And I think the way that Jason put it, at the very minimum, as starting a very clear picture, could be as simply as this voice back and forth, right? From the groups to the ISO, which means what is the reason for assembling 2 or 3 times a week? Would be, let's think about motions, for example. Is there some ideas you want to bring up to the ISO for expressing that voice? And then vice versa, when the motions come down, to express the opinions for that. If the areas could just do that and meet for this purpose, they're already a step forward. But it's taken a bit to sort of start off this representation, and then the mix and the confusion around intergroup and role in the group and area. So I think it's something where education maybe can do some of that at the local level, so that people understand what this is. Yeah,
and so that comes to my last point that I wanted to talk about was the bottom half of the page 1 is something that Paul and I worked on for Area 40 with the help of a few others in the program. Is we went out to all of our meetings.
Right.
And so we were doing this in the before time in person, and also in the age of Zoom, going out to the Zoom meetings and going to their business meetings and saying, hey, we need your meeting to have a local contact, we need your meeting to have an intergroup rep, and we need your meeting to have a GSR. Please elect those and send that information to me. And so Area 40, we had like 80% at the time, 80% of the meetings covered with GSRs.
When was that?
It was right at the beginning,
Before COVID?
2019, before COVID. So by the time we got to area assemblies, a lot of those people were no longer coming to meetings and have since thought, yeah, the service is not for me. And so the representation went away. And so we're going to need to go through and recanvass. The Bay Area website, we're trying to get our meetings accurate. The ISO is trying to get their meetings accurate. And without contacts that we can just say, hey, is this information correct for your meeting? We actually have to go to these meetings. And I brought this up at Intergroup that perhaps we as Intergroup can do this. And we had a couple people interested, but like I said, we have 103 meetings now. And so a couple of people interested in doing that is very difficult. So part of the reason why I wanted to have this here is if you all can go out to whatever meetings you go to and bring this information and have people sign up for all these various positions. If your meeting does have an IG rep, to let me know who that is. What I asked the ISO, probably too late, it was last week, I asked them for their updated spreadsheets. The spreadsheets I have were the ones that I asked for in 2022. So a lot of meetings have changed. Some meetings have gone back to in-person. GSRs rotate in and out of service. So they have the actual recorded GSR. So there is a link on this sheet on how to register as a GSR with the ISO, and that will tie you to that meeting. And so I asked for their updated sheets. The guy who does all of the databases was out on vacation, and so I had a lovely conversation with someone answering phones for the ISO. He said he couldn't get that information out to me. So what I did is I printed off all of the meetings that we have listed in the various areas and who our current contacts are. I blacked out their emails for personal safety. With the exception of mine, I have my email and phone number still listed there. So after this is over, if anyone wants to go over and update any information, I also have a new list of points of contact for each of those areas that I can either take right now or others can take out to their meetings and use that as a template to make sure that each meeting has this, and this, the local contact, intergroup rep, and GSR. And I also have a sign-up sheet for the retreat committee. Those things are all back there on those tables. We still have about 15 minutes, so I wanted to get that information out, and then we can use the rest of the portion here for question and answer, for topics on areas, GSRs, intergroup, any other things.
So on this initiative of going to the meetings and so checking if they don't have a GSR or validating the GSR is still going to the meeting, are still there. Intergroup rep and point of contact, those three, whether the same person. So you're trying to do this for what scope? For the all Bay Area meetings? So the 103 is everything in the intergroup, right?
Yeah.
So 103 meetings. So it's very effective to go the day where they have the business meeting. How do you know that?
Luck of the draw.
Okay.
So
either the first or the last of the month.
Yeah.
It's
usually the first or the last. There's been a couple that I did not get there on time and it said, I will be back in 3 weeks. And it showed up at that meeting. Okay. And that's kind of the way that we moved forward. And again, this was 2018, 2019. When the pandemic hit, a lot of shit changed. So when we changed the Bay Area website, a lot of the meeting information was incorrect. And I'm still finding stuff that I'm having to correct on a daily basis of meetings that were hybrid and they are no longer hybrid. I tried to join them on Zoom so I can get this information out. No one else is there. It's like, oh, this is a dead link. And so I have to update the website.
And so my question is like, is this I remember you mentioned this once in the intergroup. Is this project, let's say, right? Is it a project that we can manage like, okay, this is the list, who signs up for where, keeping, having, running it as a project like that. We know who's picking up which meeting, and then whether it's actually going.
That would be awesome, but it hasn't gotten that far.
Okay, so it hasn't that. Right?
Yeah, it's just, again, with the amount of people that are showing up to intergroup, we don't have enough people to head those. And so I've taken this on as a personal project. And one of the things that I'm hoping to do is if we get enough GSRs for Area 40 signed up and we have an area assembly that features more than 3 people, that I can rotate out of being the area chair for Area 40, which will allow me more time to work on the podcast over any of the other service things that I do. So there are certain positions, the podcast is one of them that I am dedicated to, but others that I could see other people rotating in that I don't necessarily need to be part of. Yeah, so this is one of those May visioning projects that I want to bring up this May. Last May, we didn't have a visioning meeting. And that idea kind of disappeared, and I want to bring that back to intergroup so that we do have fresh projects and that we do have new people heading these and being responsible and accountable is the word that I'm looking for. So we've had interest. We've had a couple people that are interested.
I'm interested.
And in breaking down, it's like for each area, if we get 5 people, so each area roughly has about 20 meetings. Some of them have 30 meetings. If you have one person responsible for hitting 5 meetings, it should go by pretty quickly.
And another thing that what we did at CSC last year that again was a large effort with little progress. At the area level, we're trying to get like a scorecard of the area. Say, is this area healthy, in healthy state? Did it show up at the last conference? Does it have an area delegate and those type of things? So same here. It's basically, here's the 104 meetings. Is this meeting healthy? Do we know who's the contact? Another aspect is like, every meeting, of course, can judge like whether are they making contribution to intergroup.
Yeah,
exactly. That's another kind of checkpoint. If somebody is sending money to intergroup, it's already a good sign of life. And hopefully the meeting is taking place, right? That's the very basic. So doing something like that, we say, okay, we got this 104. What kind of information we have, and how do we prioritize? Maybe the meetings they already have. We know who is the representative. We don't need to go first, but we go to those which are.
We also have to make sure that it's up to date representation.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, right. No, we have it in the sense like we have it, and we have if we have an email, we can do it by email. Say, are you still there? Or by phone if there's a phone contact. I don't know.
Yeah.
So there's some things we can do, without physically going there.
Yeah.
And then once we kind of make the list, we can figure out which one do we have to physically go there because we don't know what's going on.
Yeah, we do have island meetings where people will only go to that meeting. And I went out to one to announce the retreat. So they don't have an intergroup rep. And I'm saying, I'm driving out to this meeting. It's a lot farther than what I usually go to, but I announced that we have a podcast. They didn't know that. Or a couple people did, but most people didn't, that we have the retreat coming up, and gave them a whole bunch of information. It's like, this is why it's important to have important contact information so we can send you all of this. One of the other visioning ideas is someone had mentioned, not Discord, it's some sort of group chat thing.
WhatsApp?
WhatsApp.
Okay.
That we can perhaps coordinate for announcements at at various levels. So I tried to do this with the various areas, and the ISO got pissed that I can't do chain emails, so I can't grab 4 areas at a time and send out an email. So it gets flagged. So I can do one at a time, but I can't do multiple. And so if we could have one area that we can all go to find information besides the Bay Area website, we do announcements there, but an email list that can go out to all sorts of people so they can get information. That would be wonderful.
I had a question.
Yeah.
So for you said it was Area 41 and 77 that the people, like the chairs.
Yeah, they don't have current chairs.
Do we know, are there registered GSRs in those areas?
Yes.
But they just don't have chairs, and so there's no coordination?
Correct. So we've talked about that at intergroup.
Okay.
There are people that have wanted to get their areas up and running again. And again, it's really up to those people in those areas. So if you're in the East Bay and want your East Bay area, which would be Area 41, to have an area assembly so you can get stuff like this going, there's a way to contact the ISO to ask for. That's one of the reasons why I was hoping to get the updated database information. They've got a list of all the currently registered GSRs, and you can email them and then perhaps get an area assembly going again.
That's actually not always true. In the sense that sometimes they miss some of the registration going in, so it's always good to verify.
Anything else?
I want to make a pitch for the retreat committee.
Yeah.
So this year, I'll make a general announcement in the room so people don't have to, double hear it. But I did want to encourage everyone here. The retreat doesn't come together by magic. It is not a lot of hard work, but it requires individuals to say, I will do X, and do it. Jason has done a tremendous amount of work, and other individuals have stepped up, but the guidance that we received from our own board of directors was, hey, we're always seeing the same faces. And it's great that you guys are doing it, but it's not healthy. You're not practicing your 7th tradition if it's always the same 10 people guiding the retreat. And so we are looking to get as many new volunteers at so many different levels, at any different level, to be a part of this and to bring it together. And it's doable. And it's not one of those things where we're going to leave you out in the wind like, oh, thank God you got it, I'm out. We know that there's a transition, and some positions are harder to even let go of. But it starts at this base level, and announcing it. So our next retreat committee meeting is going to be Saturday at 11 a.m. Next week. It's sort of a post-mortem on, hey, what worked and what didn't work about the retreat this time around. If you've got ideas and input, everyone is invited to come, especially if you think you have an idea or you'd like to be of service. So there'll be more announcements.
Yeah, and I will post the link up on the Bay Area SAA.org under announcements saying post-retreat meeting.
Yeah.
Or we'll get the wording right, but all are welcome.
Yeah.
And then doesn't meet until November, right? The next.
Well, we'll decide.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, if we need a couple of days of postmortem or there's some momentum on getting like new volunteers, we will initiate that, and we'll also make a decision about when our next meeting is. Most of the year, there's not much to do.
Last year, one of the things that we talked about that never got off the ground was creating a retreat committee website. And so there was a lot of interest. And so we did have a cadence of every couple of weeks. We were still meeting, this is well after the retreat, but eventually other things took priority. But so we will find out what the cadence of retreat committee meetings will be after next Saturday.
So if you like the retreat, we don't just want your like, we want your subscribe.
Are there particular positions that are harder to fill than others?
Yeah. So committee chair, I was a reluctant committee chair. I've served on the committee for a long time, and our last year's committee chair stepped down, and there was a void week after week after meeting. Who's going to do this? Who's going to do this job? And several people were tapped, myself included. I turned it down, and then I took it up. So that's. And as it turns out, it's been good. It's been manageable, and it's been seriously helping my recovery. Less. It was a lot less. Like you had mentioned, it was a lot less struggle and work than I thought you would need to have in order to be a committee chair. So that's one. The registrar has been run by our good friend Tor forever. He is good at it, and he has always been doing it. He would love to let go. But in order for him to let go, he has to train the next person, and no one wants his job. Because he's done such a fantastic job at it. The treasurer requires, Howard is our treasurer, and he's really fantastic when it comes to the numbers and working it and keeping us on track, and he's coordinating, and again, he's been doing it for a long time, and he would like to hand that over. He'd be happy. He'd be overjoyed to train someone else to do that.
And prior to him doing that, he was treasurer for intergroup for at least 5 years.
Yeah, for 5 years. The program committee chair, we've had good luck in getting that filled in the last couple of years. The person who did it this year, she stepped up and was just like, oh my God, it's like no one else had to do anything. She's like, oh, I need to get a committee together and get some volunteers. Bam, bam, you. Okay, I need to put a program together. She stresses about it, but the programs have come together. We're meeting now, every timing, every event, the programs that you're holding, she helped manage to put those together. And maybe, since she's fresh, she'll stick on for another year, but I'm sure she'd be happy to let that go if someone, wanted to help in that regard. I think those are the ones that are hard to, Jason, you've been doing friggin' outreach forever. I don't know.
Yeah, it's easier for me with the podcast. So.
Yeah. Jason just pushes the button.
Yeah.
If you listen to the podcast, come to the retreat.
Yeah.
And then
I do update announcements on the website, and then whatever meetings I go to, make the announcement.
We had an ongoing meal coordinator. He had a resentment at a retreat that he went to. He said, "This food sucks. Why is there so much of this blah?" And we said, "Dude, you have a problem. Join the committee." He did. He took on the meal coordinator, and he ran it for years, and it was wonderful. And he stepped down, and we got a new person in this year who. Again, it was, please somebody volunteer, please somebody, we need to have meals. And eventually someone did. And they did a great job. A veteran in the program, familiar with stuff, willing to be of service. That was the criteria. Are you willing? He's just willing to be of service. So it worked.
Yes, I gotta leave.
All right.
Okay.
Do you want to close it out with Serenity Prayer?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We are at time. All right. Thank you guys so much for joining. Let this circle represent that we don't have to do this alone. Let's do the we version. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Keep coming back. It works. So I loved being at the retreat, and I do want to talk a little bit more about the retreat on another episode, just how fun it was just to be around so many other addicts in recovery and having a lot of fun outer circle stuff. But getting to take part in so many of the workshops throughout the weekend was just incredibly awesome. In future years at our retreat, I do hope to have a lot of the information for each of our meetings more available for everyone to fill out. The workshop that I held only had a few people in it, and we tried to get the message out throughout the entire weekend, really being proactive with recruiting people to be on the retreat committee for next year. I did want to mention at our intergroup, if you are in the Bay Area and hearing this as this episode drops, our visioning meeting, which takes place every May, which is our brainstorming session, is going to be happening on May 11th. And if you are interested and have any new ideas for things that you want intergroup to do over the next year, please feel free to attend. And you don't have to be an intergroup representative to join the meeting. We do have links on the Bay Area SAA website on how to attend the intergroup. So speaking of our intergroup, at our April meeting, we had the former chair of the ISO board talking about service resumes and looking to recruit people into service for various ISO committees. So I did want to mention the ISO's service website, which is saa-iso.org. There are a number of parts of the website that are open to the public, and then others that are member services where a password is required. If you do have the password for the year's convention, it is the same username and password that goes along with that, and that changes year to year. But if you go to the homepage on the service website, right up at the top, there is a click here to fill out the service resume. I filled one out a few years ago, and I have been a little bit too busy to be able to join any of the ISO service, but there's different things that you can check off if you're interested in joining: the Board of Trustees, the Literature Committee, Conference Steering Committee, the CSC that Daniela brought up, the Nominating Committee, and other committees such as Prisoner Outreach, Information Systems and Online Presence, Intergroup Communications, and that would be the ICC, LGBT Outreach, Women's Outreach, Intimacy and Sexual Avoidance Awareness, Public Information and Cooperation with the Professional Community, or PICPC, and other ISO positions. So if you are interested in being of service with helping out the ISO, please go to the saa-iso.org website and check that out. There is also a great section on GSRs there, and I will be putting links for how to register GSRs and other information. I'll put a link to the pamphlet that I was reading, and there's also some information about delegates and areas. So the service website just has a ton of information. It also has recordings and things from past convention workshops that had to deal with areas: the Conference Steering Committee, the convention, PICPC, literature, the 12 traditions. So there's a whole number of those that you can listen to there. If you don't have the username and password, you can always email me at jason@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com, or you can email the ISO at their email address, info@saa-recovery.org. In my workshop, I mentioned that I had emailed the ISO looking for information for our areas. If you are interested in finding database and meeting records, you can email webmaster at saa-recovery.org. One of the emails that I did get from the ISO has a bunch of different email addresses for various things that the ISO does, and I will list those out in the show notes as well. A couple other things before I close out this episode. When I was talking about the Bay Area Intergroup, we had an email issue coming up with our listserv, so we changed to groups.io. And if you are interested in getting Bay Area Intergroup emails, you can subscribe to our intergroup email by sending an email to Bay Area SAA, all one word, -intergroup plus subscribe @groups.io. And I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Similarly, our retreat committee is on groups.io, and we have a couple of different emails there: volunteers at SFSAA retreat groups.io and retreat committee at SFSAA retreat.groups.io. I know there's just a lot of information in this episode. So I will try to do my best to put as many links that were mentioned into the show notes as I can. I'm not going to read through any listener feedback or YouTube comments on this episode. I did attend the SAA and COSA speaker meeting this past weekend and will hopefully be getting the links to those recordings soon and share those as episodes. And hopefully I'll be scheduling some new interview recordings soon. My ear is still having a congestion issue, and it has been continually ringing for over a month with the tinnitus that has followed along with this. So I haven't really been wanting to have my headphones on all that much. But yes, I will be scheduling some new recordings in the next couple of weeks. So if you did have any feedback for the podcast, please reach us at feedback@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com. And if you wanted to get a hold of me personally, you can reach me at jason@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com. And with that, I'm going to close out this episode. I thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, keep coming back. The views and opinions contained in the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Bay Area Intergroup or the ISO of SAA.